So vocal. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of The Poet Prince. This is Philosophy for Breakfast. We've got the I Am Discourses. We got Shakespeare's Sonnets. We're going to start with number 1. And we've got Plato the Statesman to get our Stoic philosophy in. The I Am Discourses. What is it about? Well, why don't we read the foreword. The 33 discourses contained in this book were dedicated over a visible light and sound ray in our home during 1932 by the Ascended Master Saint Germain and those other Ascended Masters directly concerned with this activity. The sound of his voice was physically audible to everyone in the room. At times, his visible, tangible presence also stood within the room, when he radiated the power and energy of the light rays to accomplish special work. The training and preparation for him to do this at the present crisis of the outer world was given us over a period of 30 years, that it might be accomplished at this time, and assistance from the Ascended Masters come forth in this way to protect and free all individuals who make conscious effort to correct themselves and attain mastery over all things on this earth. Never before, except in the retreats of the Great White Brotherhood, has such intensified, transcendent instruction concerning the I Am been given to individuals. Not for thousands of years have the true inner instruction and use of the sacred flame been taught to mankind, as Saint Germain and others of the Ascended Masters have revealed. Permission for them to be explained to students as given forth in these discourses has been granted to us by these great ones. Such instruction as is herein contained has never been given to students until after a 3-year probation in the retreats. The condition of the outer world at the present time is such that those who sincerely seek the light and want the constructive way of life must have more than human help if they are to survive over the present period of chaos, which is the accumulated discord generated by humanity en masse through the centuries, and which is pressing heavily upon the outer experience of individuals today. The need for protection and help for the children of earth is so great at the present hour that the great Ascended Masters and Legion of Light have let the bars down, so to speak, and have released this inner understanding of the mighty I Am presence into the outer life of mankind, that all who want the light and will make conscious effort to attain their own freedom and mastery may have the assistance which will give them the eternal victory. Only fragments of the real understanding of the I Am presence have been given to the outer world until now. The Ascended Master Saint Germain says, "It is the most important understanding mankind can ever have, and there is no freedom nor perfection for the individual except through this conscious application." He considers it of such paramount importance that he dictated more than 33 discourses in which he explains what happens in the outer life of the individual when one says "I am." He also says, nothing will bless the individual to so great a degree as the conscious understanding of this creative word. When the phrase "mighty I Am presence" come forth is used throughout this series of books, it is always a call to the God presence to pour forth or release the outpouring of perfection which the one making the call desires. It is always thought, felt, written, or spoken with the feeling of intense love. It is always a call to God, the mighty I Am Presence, to establish perfection everywhere. And thus let God's will, perfection, be made manifest on earth. When a command is given, it is always the outer self calling unto God, and in the name of the mighty I Am Presence, commanding substance and energy to obey the decree given, which is the self-conscious effort required in order to open the door for the intelligence of the I Am to release its perfect manifestation. We've got some long sentences in this book. This book only carries the Ascended Master's understanding of the I Am, but it is charged with Saint Germain's Ascended Master consciousness and the ray of light and love from his heart, which is the Ascended Master's feeling and comprehension of its full power, forever self-sustained. May this book of I Am Discourses anchor the attention of all who read or contact it so powerfully upon each individual's own divinity, that the full Ascended Master consciousness of the mighty I Am Presence shall fill the earth and release with the power of the 1,000 suns the eternal dominion of the light of God that never fails. And that was from Godfrey Ray King. And that's the foreword. So that's what's waiting. This journey that will continue. But for now, we're going to switch over to something a bit more stoic. We're going to go to Cambridge Texts in the History of Political Thought, Plato, edited by Julia Annas and Robin Waterfield. All right, let's read the blurb here. The Statesman is Plato's neglected political work. It is crucial for an understanding of the development of his political thinking. In some respects, it continues themes from the Republic, particularly the importance of knowledge as entitlement to rule. But there are also changes. Plato has dropped the ambitious metaphysical synthesis of the Republic, changed his view of the moral psychology of the citizen, and revised his position to one of the role of law and institutions. In its presentation of the statesman's expertise, the statesman modifies, as well as defending in original ways, this central theme of the Republic. The Republic. This new translation? I always wonder that when I get to that word. Is it translation or translation? Is it transformation or transformation? I would have said translation and transformation, but transformation sounds posher, doesn't it? But is it right? Is it correct? That's the question. It is based on the revised Oxford text of Plato and makes accessible the dialogue to students of political thought in clear and contemporary language. The introduction sets the argument in the context of the development of Plato's thought and outlines the philosophical and historical background necessary for a full understanding of the text, particularly for a political theory readership. Explanatory notes and guide to further reading are also provided for the student. Did you get any of that? I didn't really get any of that. I just kind of was trying to say everything right. Let's look at the preface. Preface or preface? It is perhaps appropriate for the Statesman to be the first of Plato's works to come out in the Cambridge Texts in the History of Political Thought. It is certainly the most neglected of Plato's works and one of the most in need of a fresh presentation. The new translation provides a more accessible version than any hitherto available in English, and the introduction attempts to locate the dialogue in Plato's political thought, taking advantage of the enormous improvements in our understanding of this, that recent discussions have produced. Few of these directly concerned the Statesman itself, and we hope that this new translation will help to bring the work more centrally into the discussions of Plato's political thought, along with the more familiar Republic and Laws. Those are different texts by him, apparently. Republic and Laws. One called Republic, one called Laws. The translation and textual notes are by Robin Waterfield, and the introduction to the other notes by Julia Annas. Each of us, however, has read and commented on the other's work, and the result is the product of a harmonious collaboration that has been interesting and profitable for us both. We hope that its fruits will introduce others to this uneven, often puzzling, but seminal dialogue. So it's a dialogue, it's a conversation between people, and if you look, it's written sort of like a play or a transcript. You can see young Socrates says, and then the visitor, young Socrates, visitor, So those are the two characters, young Socrates and visitor, in that little bit I was just looking at anyway. Let's go for the introduction. The Statesman, or Politicus, that's another name for it, is central to any serious concern with Plato's political thought. It clarifies and modifies Plato's earlier positions, especially in the Republic, and illuminates the principles of his political thinking even while these are in the process of changing. Plato, 429 to 347 BC, is known and discussed widely as a political thinker, but usually on the basis of his best-known work, The Republic, and this is in many ways a pity. The Republic is a work in which political theory is mixed together with ethical theory and metaphysics, and the political strand, which is not a very large one, is hard to disentangle and open to many different kinds of interpretation. Further, the political ideas, though expressed with vigor, are very sketchy, and their relation to contemporary political reality is remote. Plato's later works, Statesman and Laws, are more properly seen as works of political theory than is the Republic, and studying them can both help us to understand the Republic better and also put it into perspective as being only part of a long development in Plato's thinking. In the Statesman, for example, Plato defends the ideal of the ruler as possessor of a particular kind of expertise, namely expertise in the political skill or art, politicae techne. It's quite cool, political technique, political tech. This idea dominates the political aspect of the Republic. Political problems are to be solved by imposing an ideal ruler, and the only interesting question is what the nature of that ruler is to be. Yet we find that, in the Statesman, the Republic's metaphysical backing for this idea has dropped away, and that a new and far more politically relevant defense emerges. Furthermore, Plato displays a new interest in the kind of compromise that the rule of the ideal expert must make, in the real world with laws and institutions. Likewise, while the Statesman does not overtly challenge the Republic's view of the ideal ruler's need for both education and constraint in managing his subjects, we find that Plato is in fact considerably changed his view of the moral psychology. Plato has in fact considerably changed his view of the moral psychology of the citizen and is moving towards a more egalitarian view of the relation of ruler and ruled. Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC, Plato's greatest pupil, responded to Plato in his own political theory as well as in other areas of philosophy. His own political views center on the nature of political rule and what distinguishes it from other forms of authority, and it is clear from his writings that he reacts creatively to the Statesman both in fundamentals, for example, in the nature of political rule, and in details, for example, the framework for considering the various kinds of constitution, the theory of the mean. Although Aristotle criticizes the Republic in Book 2 of his Politics, his objections are somewhat mechanical, and it is unhelpful to compare Aristotle's work with the Republic rather than with the later dialogues which Aristotle clearly found more useful as works of political thought. However, stimulating as Plato's political ideas in the Statesman are, it is not surprising that the dialogue has been neglected by comparison with the Republic or even the Laws. To get to the political theory, we have to go through lengthy passages which on first reading can strike us as a mixture of the boring and the weird. The Statesman is not only a discussion of political theory, but an exercise in general philosophical method, deliberately presented as part of the same exercise as the one resulting in the theory of being and not being in the Sophist. But Plato's presentation of this method has been criticized for its longueur, Longueurs. I'll have to check that one. He has abandoned the literary and attention-grabbing devices that are so plain in the Republic. Part of his message is now that philosophy, perhaps especially political theory, requires hard and often tedious work if we are to get it right rather than rushing, as in the Republic, to conclusions that may be exciting but may also be premature. That's so important when you're communicating with people, when you're trying to discuss something, when you're having a disagreement, when one person has an idea, you have an idea, and you're trying to hash it out, you're trying to discuss, to dash to pieces each other's ideas until you can find out what's real and solid in amongst them, almost like a stoneworker chipping away. You can't just skip. So many conversations you have where you have a disagreement or something, and you don't really get to the solution or arrive at what is true, what you can both agree on. You both just sort of, more often than not, agree to disagree. Or you say, well, you say this, I say that. Who's to say who's right? Well, somebody's probably more right than the other person. And if you spend a little bit more time, it'll be very tedious and annoying, and that's what a lot of people would rather not do. You might get to what's true, to a degree at least. Plato now stresses the need to work carefully and thoroughly through often unpromising looking and trivial material if we are to be entitled to firm ethical conclusions. And the result has inspired far fewer readers than has the Republic. But for just the same reasons, anyone who wants to get beyond the superficial grasp of Plato's political thought that comes from reading only the Republic should pay careful attention to the Statesman, as well as the Laws. The dialogue is devoted to the search for a definition of politikos, the professor of politicae techne, or the skill of ruling and organizing a political community, something for which the English Statesman is a pallid but unavoidable equivalent. The reason for this is something that remains constant from the earliest dialogues. To understand what we are talking about when we use a given term, rather than relying on what we pick up from other people or books and do not fully understand, we need to be able to give an account, to say what it is that we are talking about. We need to be able to do this because only if we are armed with this kind of general grasp of the field can we articulate an explanation and defense of the judgments that we make on the matter. In the early dialogues, this is often given the not very happy name of a search for definitions. However, what Plato is doing has little to do with definitions in our sense, and is connected rather with the demand for expert knowledge of what one is talking about. We'll just keep going for a little more. In the Statesman, we notice an obvious difference from the earlier kind of search where Socrates attacks the views of others in an ad hominem way and generally concludes that they have learned what courage or friendship or whatever is the subject of search is not, rather than what it is. Now the dialogue represents not the process of search, but the process of exposition. The main speaker is not Socrates, who would presumably have appeared to anachronistic in this role, but an anonymous visitor from Elia. And the young interlocutor is clearly a pupil who is learning, not a partner who is contributing negatively or positively to the philosophical investigation. Further, we try to establish what a statesman is by narrowing down the field in a process called division of wider terms. This procedure, however, is supplemented by contributions of rather different kinds: a strange myth, a discussion of the nature of illustration, and a long, paradigmatic illustration of weaving, an investigation of the relationships between expertise, measurement, and the trio of excess, deficiency, and the mean, a discussion of the different types of political constitution, and finally, an account not of the statesman's nature, but of his central political tasks, the weaving of different types of people into one political fabric. Even a casual reader is bound to be struck by the contrast between the officially organized and pedagogic nature of the discussion and the bumpiness of the actual ride, with surprising digressions and methodological sidetracks, and a generally untidy and unfinished air to the conclusion. Great. Scholars have divided. Some think that Plato is here not in full literary control of the material, while others hold that the reader is being cued that the formally dominating structure of definition by division is not to be taken too seriously after all. Whatever the reader's conclusion about this, the Statesman is far less successfully unified than its official companion piece, the Sophist, but its different parts do in the end contribute to the understanding of a single issue, the nature of political rule, but they do so in rather diverse ways. Perhaps what we find is the result of Plato discovering that the problem of political rule is methodologically more complex and harder to expound than the nature of being and not being. The Statesman is then more taxing than the Republic to read and absorb. It is worthwhile, however, both for the light it sheds back on the Republic and for its interesting discussion of themes and interested Plato throughout his life. And then the next part will be called The Ruler's Expertise, which I'm very keen to hear, but we'll do that next time. It's interesting, it sounds kind of like almost like a handbook